right, so let's go ahead and get into this sew along part of hashtag vintage Vember. So the pattern that I am using is Simplicity 9700. It is the 1970s vintage pattern. Now, one thing about this pattern is this was put on my Make 9 list to sew. It did not win for that, which was the pants. But because it's vintage Vember and it came in a really close second, I decided to make this as part of the Make 9 simply because there's not any winter patterns for a coat that I will be making. So this is replacing the winter coat. I might still make a coat slash jacket for it, but because of that, I'm like, well, you know, since this was asked many of times on my Make 9 list, as well as my request line, I said, well, why not? Let's go ahead and do it. And I felt like this one would be a good one that you guys would want me to do as well. So let's go ahead and get into it for sure. So first things first, let's go ahead and talk about the toolkit. Now, I have a complete video on what you will need in order to construct Simplicity 9700. I'm going to go ahead and drop the sewing toolkit in the description box below, as well as on the end screen. However, the only thing I'm going to tell you is the notions that you will need. Now, I am doing view B, but I may and may not add that pocket from view A on the side right here. Okay, I'll know once I get to that section. But what you will need will be 6 1/2-inch buttons and a 16-inch exposed or all-purpose zipper. Do not get the invisible zipper, okay? You need an exposed zipper, all right? So now that we talked about the toolkit as well as the notions used, let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct this garment. All right, so before I get into the pattern pieces, you're going to see it here, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the pattern instructions. Now, I am cutting view B. So in terms of the interfacing for your jumpsuit, you need to cut pattern piece number 6 and 10 for your jumpsuit of interfacing. Now, because I am doing view B, depending on your height, you may need that extension piece, which is 1A and 5A. So because I'm doing view B, I will be cutting pattern pieces 1 through 3 and then 5 through 11. The only pattern piece that I will not be cutting is pattern piece number 4. I may or may not do the side pocket, which is pattern piece number 11. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is turn it over so you can see the cutting layout. Now, this is the cutting layout that I am using. I am using a linen fabric. So my linen fabric is 54 inches. So because of that, I'm going to follow the 45-inch all sizes, which I have already cut out all my fabrics, but I'm just giving you an example. Now, if your fabric is as close to 60 inches as possible, like 58, 59 inches, I would advise you to cut out the sides for the 60-inch based off the size you are cutting. All right. Now, just to kind of give you a little bit into the instructions, I will be doing unit 1, which is the front. I will be doing the upper pockets and flaps, which is similar to when I did the romper, which is Butterick 6890. So I will not be showing you how to do the pockets and the flaps on this tutorial because it's the exact same thing. I will link to that video in the description box below so you could see how I did the pockets as well as the flaps. Now, I may show you how to do the pockets because it is a little different. You know what? Just because for the sake of this tutorial, I'll go ahead and do the pockets and the flaps in this tutorial so you can see that. All right. Now, I will not be doing the lower pockets for view A because I'm doing view B and I do not want those details. If you want that detailed, make sure you follow step number 8 through 10 in order to get that. We'll go ahead and do the back and shoulder seams, the collar and the facing. After we do the collar and the facing, we'll go ahead and attach the zipper in unit 6. After attaching the zipper, we'll go ahead and put in the sleeves and then go ahead and do our underseams and our side seams. Now, if you want the pocket, you can do that side pocket at the very bottom. It's great for me for cell phone, really is what it is. Then we'll go ahead and do the inseam, the leg seams, the side seam, put on our sleeves and our cuffs, and then finish it off. All right. So that it's not many units, to be honest with you. However, it is a lot of steps. You know, you have roughly, I'm going to say give or take, about 35 steps. All right. So let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need in order to be successful with sewing this jumpsuit. Let's go ahead and get into it now. So the first pattern that you will need in order to construct this jumpsuit is pattern piece number 1, which is the front. You need to cut 2. Just make sure you put the wrong side of your pattern piece up facing you and cut around. Depending on the size that you are using, just make sure you follow the cutting layout. But this is pattern piece number 1, cut 2 of fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 5, which is the back, cut 2 of fabric. Now, one thing I want to show you is the extension piece. Now, because I am 5'6" and I measured how long I want it, now I will be wearing mine with heels. So therefore, I definitely needed to make sure that I do that extension piece. And then what I created was 1-inch lines all the way, and then just kind of put it up where I need it, because this jumpsuit is really, really long. So you definitely need to measure from the your shoulder all the way down to where you want it on your body. And then measure from the shoulder piece, which I'm going to show you that here. You want to measure from this shoulder piece right here. Let me move it down so you can see it. This shoulder piece all the way down to however long you want it. Okay. So make sure you do that. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 2, which is your upper pocket. You need to cut 4. Make sure you transfer all your notches and your dots as well. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 3, which is your upper flap. You need to cut 4 fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 9, which are your sleeves. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Next pattern piece is optional. If you want that side pocket, cut pattern piece number 11. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 10, which are your cuffs. You need to cut 4 fabric and interface 2. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 7, your front facing. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Do not interface your front facing, okay? I just want to make sure you know that. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 8. Now this one is based off of what sides and how wide your fabric is. You could cut it with the wrong side up or the right side up. It's completely up to your cutting layout. But this is pattern piece number 8, your facing piece. You need to cut 1 on the fold of fabric and also interface 1. And then the last pattern piece is pattern piece number 6, which is your collar. You need to cut 2 on the fold of fabric and 1 on the fold of interfacing. Now that's all the pattern pieces you will need, but let's go back to pattern piece number 8, because this one does not say to interface. So you're not going to interface pattern piece number 7 or 8, which are your front and your back facing. All right. Only interface pattern piece number 6 and 10. All right. So now that we talked about the pattern pieces, let's go ahead and get right on into the sewing. All right, go ahead and grab pattern piece number 1, which is your front. Now I did some prep work, and you could do this. I did this off camera, so I'm just going to tell you what I did. First, you want to stay stitch your neck area. So you're going to stay stitch from your shoulder all the way to the center front on both pattern pieces, or both pieces, right? After you do that, go ahead and serge the center front. Why? Because you're going to have a zipper there. So you want to go ahead and serge that area before you start getting sewing. Okay. So it could be already finished off. All right. The next thing we're going to do is go ahead and sew up our front. So basically you want to go ahead and pin starting at that dot. All right. Now you do have the center front curve, so you want to pin from the dot all the way down to the curve. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of rearrange it so you could go ahead and pin and see what I'm doing. So I'm going to pin at that notch, and then I'm just going to pin around that curve. Okay. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the center front pin from the top to that curve area, what we're going to do is I'm going to stitch from the curve all the way to the dot. When I get to the dot, I'm going to back stitch and switch to a basting stitch. So I'm going to use a regular length stitch at the curve, come all the way around the curve, still using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then when I get to this dot right here, I'm going to back stitch. I'm going to switch to a basting stitch and stitch from that dot all the way up. Now that's how I install my zippers, because the zipper is going to be used along the front portion, okay? So you definitely want to make sure that that is basted, and then you're going to press your seams open, all right? So let's go ahead and do that now. Now, one thing before we go over to the sewing machine, before I go over to the sewing machine that I'm going to do, so there's a dot here and there's a dot here. This is the area that your zipper will be in. So you only want to base from this dot all the way up to this dot. Do not base all the way up, okay? So just between these two dots right here. I hope that makes sense. All right, so go ahead to the sewing machine and do that now. All right, so now that I have my center front sewn, I have regular length stitch. I'm gonna bring it up so you can see it. Regular length stitch from here all the way to this dot. I switch to a basting stitch from this dot to this dot, all right? So I'm hoping you can see that the basting stitches from here. Now what I'm gonna do is go to my ironing station, press the seam open, and then I'm gonna put some interfacing between the dot and prepare my zipper, all right? So I'm not gonna show you how to do the zipper because we have done zippers on this channel before, but it is a exposed zipper. It's similar to doing a regular length zipper, but all you need to do, I'm gonna kind of walk you through it. So after I press my seams open, what I'm gonna do and put interfacing between there to stabilize it, it's going to look like this. I'm gonna show you. It's going to look like this, okay? So imagine it being pressed open, which I'm gonna show you this on camera. And I'm going to basically make sure that my zipper is placed with this pull down like this in the center, okay? Now make sure that you have the top of your zipper pull all the way up, okay? Because you definitely, mine is a little bit longer, so I'm just gonna make sure that I have enough. But you definitely want to make sure that you put the bottom portion of your zipper at that dot. I would extend it about, I'm going to extend mine about a 1/2 inch, and then make sure that it goes all the way up. Then what I will do is baste on both sides of the zipper, rip out the seams, you know, the basting stitch that we have that's keeping this together. Rip that out, and then make sure you sew using a regular length stitch down, across, and back up, okay? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my zipper area interfaced, well, stabilized, I should say, and pressed open, now what I'm gonna do is take my zipper and I'm going to pin right there at the bottom, right? Now, right underneath this dot, I did make a little clipping so it could, you know, I could get that as good as I wanted, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin this zipper in place. I'm just pinning on the seam allowance. I'm going to make sure that the zipper is in the center of that line. And I'm going to pin, not all the way up, I'm just going to pin all the way to that top dot right here, okay? So go ahead and pin your zipper in place now. All right, so now that I have my zipper in place, what I'm going to do just on the seam allowance, I'm going to base one side all the way up to that dot right here, and then I'm going to base the other side as well, all right? So go ahead and base the zipper side in place now. All right, so now that I have my zipper basted on, what I'm gonna do is open it just like this, and you'll notice that the zipper extends far up, but that's okay. Now I'm gonna take my seam ripper and I'm going to go from where the basting stitch starts, and I'm just gonna kind of, being careful, I'm going to basically open up that zipper area where my basting stitches are, okay? So go ahead and open up your zipper area now. All right, so now I'm starting to get towards the top, and I'm just going to take my seam ripper and kind of go really, really slow to make sure that I am not going over or ripping my fabric, okay? So I'm just going to put my seam ripper there and just go very slow over the last stitches. And that's what your zipper area should look like thus far, okay? So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure I clean up all this loose thread right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and unzip my zipper. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have my press this and then go down, across, and back up to secure the zipper. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so I am at the sewing machine. I'm getting ready to sew on my zipper. So I'm just going to show you just a little bit of this process, not a lot of it, because it's just basically putting on your zipper foot. And I have my zipper at about 1/4 of an inch right here, the zipper teeth. And what I'm going to do is right at that dot, I have my needle in at that dot and my presser foot down. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew a little bit very slowly, back stitch to secure it. And then I'm just going to sew all the way down, sewing slowly, making sure that I stay on that 1/4 of an inch line to sew my exposed zipper in place. All right. So you go ahead and do your zipper and do the exact same thing that I'm doing now. And when I get to the bottom, I'll show you how to pivot. All right. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right. So now that I went ahead and pivot, so basically I got to the end right here, I pivot, and now I'm pivoting again, and I'm going to sew the other zipper part up. Now I know there's a zipper right here, but you're going to move it out of the way so you could definitely sew using 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And you're going to do the exact same thing, just like so, making sure that that zipper teeth stay at that 1/4 of an inch. My 1/4 of an inch is right here, so I want to make sure my zipper teeth stay at that 1/4 of an inch. Now, I accidentally pinned it the wrong way, but it's okay. It's going to work out perfectly. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the zipper up a little bit to give me a little bit of room. I'm going to sew a little bit more. And once I get back to this zipper area right here, I'm going to pause, lift my presser foot, and I'm going to move that zipper all the way back down so it's out of my way. Okay. Just like this. All right. Now I'm going to put my presser foot down and I'm going to sew all the way up to the other dot right here. Okay. So go ahead and finish off your zipper area now. And now that I got to the dot, I went ahead and finished it off, and that is my zipper area. So let's go ahead and finish it up. All right, so now that I have the zipper section done, I'm going to show you what it looks like. You see how it looks nice and gorgeous. Let's go ahead and adjust that right there. You see how that zipper is zipped up with no problem, no issues. That's exactly what I want. Now, just make sure your zipper go all the way to that dot right here, not all the way up. If you went all the way up, you're going to have to take it out. Okay, it should have just went to the dot right here. All right. So that's that. So now I'm going to grab the instructions because I know you guys noticed that I went out of order. And Rochelle tries not to, but it was just fitting to do the zipper now and get it out the way because that's the portion that's probably the hardest of why you guys wanted a sew along for this. Okay. So we did unit number 1, which is the front. And we also did unit number 6, which is the zipper. Now we're going to go back to the things that, not that big of a deal to do, but we're going to go ahead and do it. So we're going to go ahead and do our upper pockets and flaps, which is unit 2. And then we'll go ahead and move over to unit 4. All right. So let's go ahead and grab pattern piece number 2 and pattern piece number 3 now. All right. So grab pattern piece number 2, which are your upper pockets for your bust pockets. Now you should have cut 4. So 2 of them is used as the facing And then 2 is used as your regular. So what I did was I just cut 4. It doesn't even matter because mine is the same color, okay? So a couple of things you want to do is go ahead and pin along the sides and the bottom of your pockets on both with right sides together. So go ahead and do that. And I'm going to do this in just a second, so that what we're going to do is we're going to start at the dot using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to, well, I'm going to start at this one, back stitch at the dot, come all the way down and around, making sure that you're pivoting, and then come all the way back up to this dot. You're going to leave the upper pocket open, okay? So do that on both pockets. And then once you are done stitching, what you're going to do is turn it right side out, and then you're going to top stitch along the stitching line. Now I created 2 clips right here, like you can see, and I'm going to make my lines there so I know exactly where I need to make my top stitching. I'll show you that here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and stitch along our pockets now. All right, so I went ahead and stitched my upper pocket into place with right sides together. I went ahead and stitched all the way around, and then trimmed it down and turned it right side out, gave it a good press. Now this right here is for my button after I top stitch. Now you probably see 2 white lines right here, which are my stitching lines. So what I'm gonna do is grab my ruler. So grab your ruler. And then what I'm going to do is take my ruler and connect the lines, okay? So I'm just gonna mark a white line all the way down. And then I'm gonna do the other line the exact same way. And make sure you do the same thing on your other pocket as well, all right? So then go to your sewing machine and you're going to sew right on the line. That's if you want the top stitching. I do, so that's why I'm gonna do it. But if you do not want the top stitching, you can definitely not do this step, all right? But because I have solid fabric, I feel like that would be perfect for my pockets, all right? So go ahead and top stitch your pockets now. But before we do that, we don't want to go to the sewing machine too many times. We're going to go ahead and start doing our flap, all right? So grab 2 flaps, just like this. So I'm going to turn them upside down like this, so I am looking at it with the dots at the bottom. And just like we did for the pockets, we're going to pin. We're going to pin down and across, okay? So go ahead and pin your your flaps in place now. All right, so now that I have the flaps in place, just similar to what you just did with your pockets, I'm going to move that up out of the way right quick. I'm just going to move that up. And then what you're going to do is using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to start at the top, come all the way down to the dot, pivot, sew across, get to this dot, pivot again, and sew back up, leaving this portion right here open. All right. So actually it's the top part. So let me turn this around and repeat what I just said. So you're going to start at this dot using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, come down across. You're going to pivot when you come down at the corners, pivot. So across 5/8 and then back up, and then back stitch at the dot. Leave this portion right here open, okay? It's the top portion. Leave that open. Once you sew all the way around, trim it down, and then turn it right side out and give it a good press, all right? So go ahead and do that and top stitch your pockets now. All right, so now that I have the flaps done, I went ahead and sewed right sides together. I turned it out. I top stitched around the pocket, not the pockets, the flap. I did top stitch around the pocket, but I top stitch around the flaps. I went ahead and made my buttonhole like you see there. Let me bring it closer so you can see. So I made my buttonhole, and then after I top stitch on those 2 lines that we made with the white chalk, like you see here, I went ahead and add my button. Now I am using a 5/8 of an inch button, but the pattern says a 1/2 inch. And you guys know me, I do not have a 1/2 inch in this color. So I used what was best, the next best thing, right? You use what you have to get what you want, okay? So the next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and attach our pockets and our flaps to our jumpsuit. So let's go ahead and grab our jumpsuit. All right, so I'm gonna move the pockets and the flap out of the way and go ahead and grab your jumpsuit. Now, you probably cannot see this on mine, so make sure you go ahead and grab your pattern piece. So let me grab my pattern piece real quick. Now, so after I pressed my jumpsuit, right, after doing this, all of a sudden you can't really see my dots, right? Now I can see it on the other side right here. So I'm just gonna turn it over just like so. Instead of grabbing my pattern piece, you can, but I'm just gonna turn it over just like this. And then I'm just gonna kind of like mark my dots again, okay? So there's a dot here and here, and I'm gonna transfer it to the top, the other side, I should say. Now on this side, you really can't see it, so I'm gonna make sure that I transfer those dots there as well. All right, so I'm just gonna transfer the dots that I just made on the other side, right here, and then I'm gonna do the same thing to the other side. So if you do not have your dots or you cannot see them, go ahead and grab your pattern piece because you want to get those things spot on, honey, okay? So we're just going to go ahead, make sure you match everything up, and then just make those dots. So I'm going to make a dot there, there, and make sure you make the dots on the size that you did. Now, my jumpsuit is a size 18. I said that already, but you know, just for reference, my jumpsuit is a size 18. All right, so now that I have my dots, what I'm going to do is take my pockets and I'm going to pin in between the bottom 2 dots, okay? So I'm gonna show you on this one and then you could just pin yours the same way. So I'm just gonna pin in between those 2 dots right here. Let me move it up and make sure that when you pin that both of them is lined up. You don't want one all the way down here and one all the way up here. That's just going to look crazy, right? So you want to make sure that you are lining them up to where they're even all the way across. So once you have your pockets lined up with those dots, go ahead and pin along both sides and across now. All right, so now that I have the pocket in place, I'm gonna put one more pin right here. Now that I have the pockets pin in place, what I'm gonna do is just top stitch all the way around the pocket, all right? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the flap done and I have the pocket sewn, top stitched all the way around, I went ahead and put one of my flaps on, but I'm gonna show you how to do the other one. So what you wanna do is you have dots right here. I'm gonna bring it forward so you can see it. And you want to make sure that those dots match up to the top dots right here, okay? So just make sure, look and make sure that you are actually having the right side of where you put your buttonholes. Make sure that those are right. Line up those dots right here. And on the other side as well. Just like this. And then what you're gonna do is take it to the sewing machine and you're gonna stitch across. Now, if you cannot eyeball from this dot to this dot, I highly advise you grab your ruler just like this, right? And you could just make you a line. Like, listen, if you can't eyeball, guess what? And you wanna be precise so you don't mess up, do what I'm doing and just make your dot all the way across, okay? No one's gonna say anything to you. And if they do, they're weird. Just saying. All right, so now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and stitch all the way across. All right, back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Then we're gonna trim it down and then top stitch right here on top. All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the pocket sewn and the flaps done, you're going to go ahead and, you know, put your buttons on the flaps. I'll do that when I'm done. The next thing we're gonna do is work on our back. So go ahead and move your front out of the way. Go ahead and grab pattern piece number 5, your back. Now, the first thing you want to do is stay stitch the neck edge. So I have already done that on my neck edge. And then what you want to do is with right sides together. Now, you can do this if you would like, and that's basically going ahead and serge your center back seams. I have not done that, but I will before I stitch it together. And then what you want to do is with right sides together, you want to pin along the entire back, okay? So go ahead and grab your pins and pin the back, and then using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning, and then you're going to back stitch all the way at the end. Go ahead and stitch your center back seam together now. All right, so now that I have the center back, I'm gonna show you. I have that attached. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna press the seam allowance to one side. Now instead of me serging my seams single, I just went ahead and serged them together. I mean, it's just a back center seam. Now what I can do is press it to one side and then top stitch, which is probably what I'm gonna do to keep it that direction, all right? Now go ahead and grab your front pattern piece, and what we're gonna do is attach at the shoulder seams. All right, so what I'm gonna do is grab my front, and I'm going to grab my back and place it with right sides together, and I'm gonna pin at my shoulder seams. So just make sure you have right sides together, and we're gonna pin both shoulder seams. So go ahead and pin across your shoulder seams now, making sure you match up the notches. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the front attached to the back, or the back attached to the front, or pinned to the front, I should say, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna back stitch at the beginning and at the end and sew across both shoulder seams. Go ahead and do that, and then finish off your shoulder seams. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my shoulders done, the next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and put on the collar. So go ahead and move your jumpsuit out of the way real quick and grab pattern piece number 6, which is the collar. Now you should have two, like you see here, you should have two, one interfaced and one's not interfaced, okay? Now what I want you to do is grab the one that's interfaced, move the other one out of the way, and then grab your jumpsuit. And then what you're going to do is you're going to pin your collar to your jumpsuit, matching up your notches, okay? Now, if you need to clip the neck area, you can as well. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unzip the top portion of my jumpsuit, just like so. So I'm able to work with my neck area, okay? So then I'm going to take my notches and I'm going to pin that to the back, all right? And then you have dots right here, which will match up to your shoulder seam, okay? So what we're gonna do is go ahead and pin at that notch. We're gonna pin the other one at that notch as well. And then I'm gonna make sure that those dots meet up with my shoulder seam. Now make sure your shoulder seam is pressed towards the back of your jumpsuit. So I'm gonna pin that right there. And I'm gonna do the same thing to the other side, making sure this dot right here meets up with my shoulder seam, and my shoulder seam is pressed towards the back of my jumpsuit instead of the front. So make sure that the seam allowance is going towards the back instead of the front, if that makes sense. All right, and I'm gonna pin there. And then I'm just gonna make sure that the front portion of my collar is at the front portion of my jumpsuit, and I'm gonna pin there. I'm gonna do that to the other side, put some pins in between, definitely make a couple of clips on my neck area, but do not clip through your stay stitching, okay? So do not clip that stay stitching area because you want that stay stitching, okay? And then just pin all the way around. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the collar pinned onto my jumpsuit, what I'm gonna do is start in the center back using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm gonna start in the center back stitch at the center back, so all the way to one end, and then back stitch at the end. Flip it over and then do the same thing in the opposite direction. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the collar on, what we're gonna do is go ahead and trim it down. So let me turn it so I could actually get a good trim on it. So I'm just going to take my fabric scissors and trim it down just like so. All right, so now that I have my collar area trimmed down, now the next thing that it has you do is press the seam allowance open. Now I'm just pressing my seam allowance up towards the collar instead of pressing it open because I trimmed mine down quite a bit. All right, that's what I'm gonna do. Do whatever you feel. I'm just gonna make sure that my seam allowance is pressed up towards the collar area. All right, now move your jumpsuit out of the way. Then you want to grab pattern piece numbers 7 and 8, which are your facing pieces. All right, so grab pattern piece numbers 7 and 8, which are your facing pieces, your front and back facing. So you should have a main piece for pattern piece number 8. Now I did not mark this, so let me mark the wrong side. That's how you keep everything together, especially when you have a solid fabric. It just works out very well to do it that way. Now grab pattern piece number 7, which is your front facing, and I'm gonna do the same thing and mark the wrong side of my front facing. So I'm just gonna mark a 7 there and turn it over and mark a 7 here as well. Now what I'm going to do is with right sides together, we're gonna pin our front facing to our back facing, okay? Matching up the notches that you have. All right, now remind you that the facing does not have interfacing on it. I know it sounds crazy, but it doesn't have any interfacing. Now, if you want to add interfacing to yours, you can do that, but just know that it may be stiffer than what it needs to be, all right? Now, match up the notches and then pin at both shoulder seams for your front and your back facing, all right? So I have one side done. I'm gonna go ahead and match up this side right here, just like so, and then pin all the way across the shoulder seam. So go ahead and pin across now. Now that I have the shoulder seams pinned using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew across both shoulder seams. Once you do that, go ahead and press your seams open. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I attached my front to back at the shoulder seams. I went ahead and pressed it open. And then what I did was I stay stitched. I'm gonna bring it up so you can see that. I stay stitched around the neck area, okay? So I stay stitched all the way around that inner neck area. After I did that, I went ahead and finished off the raw edges, which is the outer edge, all the way around your facing, okay? That's what you see there. That's what you see there. All right, now I'm gonna add my label in the back here shortly after I put my collar on. But the next thing you want to do is go ahead and grab the remainder of the collar, which is pattern piece number 6. Go ahead and grab that. And what we're gonna do is with right sides together, we're going to pin the collar to our facing, okay? So I'm going to make sure you have your collar like this, like you see, in like a U shape, okay? And then we're gonna take those 2 notches like you've seen before. Now you might have to clip yours to your stay stitching like we did previously. If you need to, go ahead and do so, okay? So I'm gonna pin at those 2 notches, and once again, the dots meet up with the shoulder seam, so pin there. And then we're gonna pin all the way around just like we did for the other collar section. I cannot talk today. I am so sorry. I apologize. All right, so go ahead and pin the rest of the collar to the facing now. All right, so now that I have the collar pinned, once again, I'm gonna start in the center back using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning, so all the way to the end, back stitch at the end, flip it over and do the same thing, starting in the center back and go to the opposite end. You're only going to sew across the top of your collar. All right, so go ahead and do that now. And once you do that, make sure you press your seam, trim your seam allowance down and press it towards the collar once again. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the collar, this collar onto my facing, I press the seam allowance up towards the collar section. I went ahead and applied my label. So now what we're going to do is pin our facing onto our jumpsuit. So go ahead and grab your jumpsuit. And what you want to do is, this is the back of my jumpsuit. What I'm going to do is just basically, with the right sides together, we're going to pin along our collar and along the front of our jumpsuit, okay? So basically go ahead and pin across the top of your collar all the way across. So go ahead and pin across your collar sections now. All right, so now that we have that pin, now what you're going to do, now please listen up, okay? Because you have a zipper here, and this is not where you're going to be sewing. You're not going to sew all of this zipper. Now mine is just an extra long, okay? I just want to let you know that. I'm going to move this out of the way, and what I'm going to do is move this. Now look how my zipper is. If you have a long zipper, you're going to have to move it out the way, okay? I just want to let you guys know that. I'm going to take my facing and pin it, but I'm going to make sure that I am matching up the notch right there, and make sure you are matching up the seam allowance right here at your collar, okay? So make sure you match up that seam because you do not want it to look wonky. So match that up. Match up the top part of your collar so it's looking good, and pin. Never get scared to have too many pins, okay? Now I'm still making sure that this is out of my way. I'm going to pin at that notch that I have right here. Pin at that notch. And then you have a dot. You see this dot? This dot meets up with that dot where your zipper starts, okay? So that's where you want to have your dot. That's where you're going to stop at too, okay? So what I'm going to do, now I'm doing this because I can, but for you, you may want to basically look and make sure your zipper is out of the way before you cut your zipper off. But I'm going to cut my zipper off like right there, okay? Now make sure you do not put your zipper all the way up there, okay? Now what I'm going to do is pin all the way to that dot, all right, where my zipper is. Now I know where my zipper started, so I'm going to make sure that I pin to that dot, all right? Because you're going to be sewing all the way down to that dot. And then put some pins in between, meaning in between. All right, so that's what you're going to do. I did one side. Go ahead and do the other side just like I did this side, making sure you pin from your collar all the way to that dot where your zipper is, okay? So go ahead and do the other side now. All right, so now that I have my pins in, I'm going to start at this dot right here. Using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna back stitch at this dot. So all the way up to the collar, pivot, still using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, stitch all the way around the collar, get to the other corner, pivot, and so all the way down until you get to this dot over here, okay? Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and at the end. After you sew that, go ahead and trim your collar down. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the facing on, you see where that dot is. I stopped at that dot. It's right here, looking good, right? And then the collar is on right here, and then the other dot is right there as well. Now what you're going to do is this raw edge right here, you're gonna press in 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, just like this. Now I haven't pressed mine, but I'm gonna go to my ironing board and press that in. And then what you're going to do is just basically after you press it in, you're going to tack it onto your zipper teeth. I would say zipper teeth, but you're just going to tack it down to where it forms a nice finish on the inside on both sides. Okay, so basically when you tack it down, you're going to push this. Let me show you. What you need to do is go ahead and push your face into the inside. So let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to get my point turner right here. I'm going to poke out the corners. Be very gentle so you don't poke a hole in there. And I'm going to do that to the other side, making sure that my seam allowance is pressed up towards the interface collar. And then the one that's the facing, you want to make sure that it's pressed down, okay? Just like this. So basically what I want to do is have this pressed down, but this bottom one pressed up and this one pressed down, okay? So make sure you have that going on, all right? And I'm going to press that. But then what you have is this portion right here is going to be on the inside of your jumpsuit like this, okay, once I press it. So you're going to have this portion pressed in 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then it's going to be tacked down to your zipper area. I mean, all you need to do is really at this part, this dot right here is going to end at the bottom of your zipper, okay? So make sure you finished off that. If you want to just serge it and tack it, however you see fit for yours, okay? So that's what I'm getting ready to do, and make sure it's a clean finish on the inside. And then make sure your zipper is zipping up good, okay? Up and down, all right? Make sure that your fabric is not getting caught in your zipper. I'm going to press all of this. So what you need to do is go ahead and press in 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and then tack it to your zipper area, however you choose fit, okay? So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so we are almost at the home stretch, which is the sleeves. But before we do that, let me recap what I just finished doing. I finished my collar. I made sure to attach the facing like you see here to the inside. That's why it looks clean and good on both sides. And then also I made sure that the zipper is not getting caught in the fabric. You do not want that, because then you could easily rip your zipper. So make sure when you pin your facing to your zipper area, like I told you to do, you are clearing the fabric and the teeth of the zipper, okay? So it should zip up with no problem and zip all the way, not all the way up, but you know, right there to those dots where that is, okay? Now you have your pockets and everything, so that's gonna be fine. So go ahead and move your jumpsuit out of the way right quick, okay? So I'm gonna zip this up, move it out the way, and then we're gonna work on our sleeves. So go ahead and move this out the way now. All right, so I'm gonna bring the instructions back to show you where we are. We are on unit number 7. So the only thing that's left to do is unit number 7, 8, 9. Now I decided not to do the side pocket. I was going to do it. I cut it out, but after all of these different steps and changes, I decided not to do that. So we're going to do 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, and then finish off with our button and buttonholes for our cuffs, okay? So not much. We just have the sleeves to do and the side seams. It's not much left to do, all right? Now, for the sleeves, I'm going to show you where it says this at because I grabbed a piece of paper. So right here on step number 21, it tells you to make what is called a continuous lap. That's where you're going to do 1.5 inch wide and 7 inches long. That's for your continuous lap. So I'm going to move the instructions out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and grab my sheet of paper, grab you a pencil, pen, or something to write quickly. Now I'm going to use a pen only because you guys can't see it if I use a pencil, right? So I'm going to use a pen, and I'm going to grab my ruler, and what we're going to do is I'm going to make a line that's 7 inches long. So 7 inches, I'm going to start at this one and go all the way down to 1/8 length, which will make 7 inches, and then 1.5 inches wide. So what I'm gonna do is go from about right here. 1.5 inches would be 3. I'm gonna go to this 3. So this is 1.5 inches, because if you do it this way, you see how it gets 1.5. So because this is just acting wonky, I don't want it looking bad. And then you're gonna do the same thing. Then you're just gonna go ahead and close it up. All right, so even though the pencil died on me, it's okay. I know what it is, so I'm just gonna kind of like make the line. I grabbed another pencil right quick to finish it. And then what you wanna do, what I'm gonna do is mark 1.5 inches wide. And then I'm gonna put 7 inches long. And then I'm gonna put continuous lap, cut 2 of fabric. Now you do not have to literally make this, but if you decide to make the jumpsuit again, you already have this piece in your pattern piece. So that's why I went ahead and did it off on paper, but go ahead and cut it out. Now I'm using my rotary cutter to cut this pattern piece out, and this is my paper rotary cutter. That's why you see paper, and you always hear me say it in my sewing toolkit, the things that you will need for any project that you do or follow any type of sew along that I am doing. You're gonna need the same items for your toolkit. The only thing that changes is your notions, okay? So now that I have my continuous lap cut out, now I'm going to cut this out of fabric as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this out of fabric off camera, and then we'll continue. So go ahead and cut 2 out of fabric now. So now that I have my continuous lap out of the way, I'm going to mark the wrong side of my continuous lap, so I know which side is the right and which side is the wrong, and then I'm just gonna move it out of my way. All right? Now, what you wanna do is go ahead and grab your sleeve. All right, so we are on the home stretch. I wanna show you that I already did one of the sleeves. So we're gonna do the other sleeves. So I'm gonna tell you this now. I'm not gonna walk you through every step of the way to put on your sleeves and your cuffs. And the reason why I'm not doing that is simply because I have showed you guys how to make a cuff and attach it, and I'll drop the link in the description box below when I did the placket dress for my Make 9, and that pattern is Simplicity 9744. So because I showed you how to do a sleeve with a cuff, I'm not gonna walk you through how to do the cuffs, how to make your buttonholes, how to put the buttons on, or any of that. What my main focus is right now for the sleeves is how you put on a continuous lap, which is this portion right here that we just drafted, okay? So that's the main thing that I'm going to do. You're gonna put your sleeves in using the flat method, sew down your side seam, and then hem, and then we'll be done. All right, so let's go ahead and move the jumpsuit out of the way right quick. As you could tell, my jumpsuit need a lot of pressing to submission, but you guys already know how I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and wash it and then starch it and get it together for photos, all right? So go ahead and grab your sleeve, which is pattern piece number 9. And what we're going to do now, what I want to tell you is go ahead and stitch this stitching line, or triangle, I should say. So I have already done that. I'm going to bring it so you can see. All right, so I already did mine. So all you're going to do is you're at the sewing machine, put it like this. You're going to start on the left side, stitch following that line, get to that point, pivot. When I say pivot, you're going to turn your fabric all the way around so you can see it, and then stitch coming down, okay? So go ahead and do that, all right? Now, after you do that, you're going to take your fabric scissors and you're going to cut right in the middle of that angle, okay? Just like this. Make sure you have some sharp scissors. Now, you do not want to cut through your stitching, okay? So don't cut through your stitching, and then do like me, protect your scissors and put the case back on, all right? And then move it out the way. Now you want to grab your continuous lap portion, all right? So this is my continuous lap. That's what it's called. That's the one that you just drafted. So now I don't need to draft another continuous lap, and I'm going to put this in my stash of things that I have drafted thus far, okay? It's continuous lap cut to a fabric, all right? Because you have 2 sleeves. Now, this is the wrong side. So now what I'm going to do, you're looking at the right side. I'm going to turn my sleeve over to the wrong side, all right? Now what I'm going to do is put the right side of my continuous lap to the wrong side of my sleeves. I know you're like, what? So I'm going to go ahead and turn it so you can see it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin my continuous lap. You see how this is the wrong side. So I'm going to turn it so I could see it, right? And I'm just going to pin the right side of the continuous lap to the wrong side of my sleeve. All right, so I'm just going to pin like this. Pin right here, and I'm going to pin all the way around. Now, one thing I want to show you is this, okay? So let me say that I'm going to start right here, right? And we're going to pin. Now, when you get to that triangle right here, you want to kind of stretch it to where you are clearing that peak, okay? You don't want it to be bunched up or any of that jazz, right? So you want to make sure it's clear, it's clean, all of that good stuff, okay? And then you want to pin. It is very crucial that your continuous lap could look off if you do not do it right, okay? So I'm just going to pin all the way down. Just make sure you kind of stretch where that point is, I should say, all right? So I'm going to repin, reposition, make sure you're getting it to where it's not bunched up, okay? Just like you see mine, it's not bunched up or anything. And if you need to repin, by all means, repin, stretch it out, whatever you need to do, okay? Now, what you're gonna do is go to the sewing machine and use 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and sew all the way across, okay? So do not make sure that it's straight and you're sewing 1/4 of an inch. However, you wanna make sure that both your continuous lap and your sleeve fabric are raw edges together as much as possible. Otherwise, you're not going to catch this peak, okay? And you want to make sure that you catch that peak, all right? Now go ahead and stitch at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance now. All right, so now that I have the continuous lap on, you see how it caught in that little V with no problem, and it's looking really good. That's what yours need to look like. Before you guys ask me, do you have to sew at 1/4 of an inch? Can you sew at 3/8? Yes, you can sew at 3/8. If the 1/4 is giving you the blues, sew at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and then trim it down to 1/4 of an inch. You can do that as well. Just remember, it is your top. So do what you feel that you need to do, all right? After you do that, what you're gonna do is take your continuous lap, fold that over where you will be stitching, which is 1/4 of an inch past that seam line right here. So about 1/4 of an inch over, you want to fold it over and then press all the way across, okay? Once you do that, open it out. You're gonna press to that crease that you just made all the way around, all the way across, I should say. And then you're going to press it again to meet where you have that seam allowance. And then you're gonna stitch as close as possible, about 1/4 of an inch away, 1/4 of an inch away, okay? So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my sleeve continuous lap, the continuous lap onto my sleeve, this is what it looks like. So after you stitch this on, the only thing I did was on the wrong side, I just folded it in half and made like a little triangle right there. I just kind of like went diagonal to close that up. So on the right side, it looks really polished. Okay. That's all I did. You do not have to do that if you do not want to. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create some gathering stitches at your sleeve cap. Create 2 rows of gathering stitch, and then you're going to use the flat method to put your sleeves onto your jumpsuit. Now, I'm not going to walk you through this because we have installed sleeves using the flat method so many times. So make sure you install your sleeve using the flat method. After you install, finish off your sleeve cap area, and then attach the side seams and the underarm seams and side seams. Okay, you're gonna go ahead and do that, and once you finish putting your sleeves inside of your jumpsuit, go ahead and do the cuff. Okay, so now before we do the cuff, I want to show you one thing. Well, before you do the cuff, I'm going to show you a couple of things you could do right now before you put your sleeves in. You could go ahead and do your side pocket. Now, I'm not putting this side pocket on mine because it's a little too small for my phone. Actually, I might, just to have that detail, but it's too small for my phone, okay? So with that being said, all you need to do is with right sides together, you have 2 dots at the top. And what I did was I made sure to leave about a 2-inch opening right here on the side. And I just put a pin right there, and I started at 1 pin, go all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, all the way around, pivoting at each corner until I got to that other pin. Once I did that, I trimmed it down and then turn it right side out, use my point turner to poke out all the corners right here, and then gave it a good press. That's what you need to do for your side pocket if you want to put a side pocket on. Now, regarding the cuffs, this is your cuffs. All right, so I'm gonna move the side pocket out of the way. This right here is your cuff. Now, what you need to do for your cuff is at the on the one that's not interfaced, the uninterfaced cuff, right, which they call the facing, right? Where you have that notch on the notched edge, you're going to press under 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and then trim it down. Once you trim it down, right sides together, you're going to start at the dot using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, stitch starting at this portion that's pressed under. And then you go sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning, back stitch at the end. So you go sew both sides and the bottom, trim the corners, and then turn it right side out. So I'm going to go ahead and turn mine right side out just like so. And then I'm going to also use my point turner right here and poke out my seam allowance, and then, poke out my corners and then give it a good press, okay? So I just need to go ahead and press this down. And then what I'm gonna do is after I sew on my sleeves, at the very bottom, let me show you what it's gonna look like, because if you need to follow my video Simplicity 9744, I highly advise you to do that for the sleeves if you are a little lost right now, okay? But what you're going to do is the sleeves is gonna be sewn. After that, and you finish off your seam allowance, you're going to create gathering stitches at the very bottom of your sleeves. So because this is sewn together, you're going to start at one side, go all the way around. So I'm going to create the first one at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and the second stitch at 1/4 of an inch. Make sure you use a basting stitch. So the first basting stitch at 3/8 of an inch all the way around, and get here, and do not back stitch at the end. Just back stitch at the beginning, go all the way around, and do not back stitch at the end. Create the first row at 3/8 of an inch and a second row at 1/4 of an inch, okay? Once you do that, pull up your gathers and then put your cuffs onto your sleeves, all right? Now, after you do your sleeves and your cuffs, when we come back, we're going to be doing not the underarm seams. we're gonna be doing the inseams, okay? Which is stitching your crotch seam and your inseam together. Once we do that, you just need to hem and then you're all done, all right? So let's go ahead and do the flat method for our sleeves, put on our cuffs, and then when we come back, all we have left to do is the crotch seam and the inseam. Let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the other sleeve in, I have my cuff done. I went ahead and did my side seams. Now this jumpsuit does not have pockets on the side or pockets on the actual jumpsuit. I want to make it vintage, so I did not add side seam pockets on this one. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to flip it inside out and we're going to start doing our inseams, okay? Inseams and my crotch seam, all right? So let me go ahead and flip it wrong side out. All right, so now that I have it wrong side out, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it so you can see it just like this. And what I'm gonna do is inseam and crotch seam at the same time. Now this, what you are seeing right here, this is my front because you see that zipper right there. So what I'm gonna do is match up my seams at the crotch area, okay? And I'm going to pin there. So let me grab my pins and I'm gonna pin there. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pin the length of my inseam all the way across, okay? So go ahead and make sure you are matching up your notches and pin all the way across your inseam, both pants leg all the way across now. All right, so now that I have my inseam pin, I'm gonna start on one side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, back stitch at the beginning, so all the way across your inseam and crotch seam, and then so all the way down to the other inseam and back stitch at the end. Once you do that, go ahead and finish off your crotch and your inseams now. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have the inseams done, I'm gonna show you this. This is the inseam. I have, well, the crotch seam and the inseams done. The only thing that's left for you to do is go ahead and try it on and then stitch your hem in place. Now, because my jumpsuit, I didn't want it extremely long to be dragging the floor. So what I did was I only did a 5/8 of an inch hem because once I tried it on, it was like right at the bottom of my shoe. And I don't like nothing dragging the floor, putting holes in my clothes. So I just did a 5/8 of an inch hem. Now, if for some reason when I try it on, it's still a little, you know, long, I will cut it off and then take it up again. But this is my hem. Everything is completely done and in place. And once you do your hem, you are all done with your jumpsuit. And yeah, let's get into it. So that's all for this tutorial of Simplicity 9700. If you make this jumpsuit, do not forget to tag me in your videos or in your post on Instagram at Rochelle.Handmade.Designs. That's it for this sew along. Until the next one.